This was not a sport in the way you know sport. This was life and death, acted out with a rubber ball. You are standing on a long stone court. Walls rise on both sides of you, taller than 3 men. The crowd presses in along the top, thousands of voices folding into a single wall of sound, and somewhere high above your head, a ring of carved stone waits in silence. You are not here to watch. You are here to play. But more than 3,000 years ago, in the forests and floodplains of what is now Mexico and Central America, people played a game where the ball was sacred, the court was a model of the universe, and the price of the final whistle could be your rate. And if you lose badly enough, you may never walk off this court alive. For most people alive today, a ball game is a Saturday afternoon. A snack. A score you forget by Monday. Own head. This was not a sport in the way you know sport. This was life and death, acted out with a rubber ball. So how did a ball game become a matter of survival? And why did people keep playing it for almost 3,000 years? Let's go back to the beginning. The first thing you need to understand is the ball itself. Today, a rubber ball is the least remarkable object in the world. You bounce one without a thought, but rubber does not grow ready-made. It has to be coaxed out of a tree, and then it has to be tamed. And the people who first did this lived in Mesoamerica thousands of years before anyone in Europe had touched the stuff. The ancient Mesoamericans tapped a tree called Castilla elastica. They collected its milky white sap. On its own, that sap dries into something brittle and weak. So they did something genuinely clever. They mixed the tree sap with juice squeezed from a morning glory vine, a climbing plant with white flowers, and the chemistry changed. The mixture turned springy, tough, and bouncy. In a paper published in the journal Science in 1999, she and her colleagues showed that mixing latex with that morning glory juice was a deliberate recipe, a way of curing rubber roughly 3,000 years before the modern world rediscovered theater. You are looking at one of the earliest examples of humans processing a material on purpose to change what it can do. A material scientist named Dorothy Hosler studied exactly this idea. Stop and let that land. Long before factories, before chemistry as a written subject, your distant counterparts in the Americas were engineering a polymer with plant juice. And we know how old this is because we have found the balls. At a waterlogged site in the Mexican state of Veracruz called El Manati, archaeologists Ponciano Ortiz and Maria del Carmen Rodriguez excavated a sacred spring where ancient people had buried offerings. Down in the oxygen-starved mud, things survived that almost never survive anywhere else. Wooden figures, polished axes, and rubber balls. 12 of them, some larger than your head, dating back roughly 3,500 years. Think about what that means. The ball came first, buried as a sacred gift, before we even find the quartz. But the quartz came soon after. At a place called Paso de la Amada, in the southern Mexican state of Chiapas, archaeologists uncovered the oldest ball court yet known, built around 1,600 years before the Common Era. A long, flat, playing alley framed by low earthen mounds. Roughly 3,600 years old. That single court tells you the game was already organized, already important, already worth shaping the very ground for, before most of recorded history had begun. So picture the world this game grew inside. It was not one empire. It was a patchwork of cultures spread across thousands of years and hundreds of miles. The Olmec, often called the mother culture, carved colossal stone heads and buried those first rubber balls. Centuries later came the Maya, with their cities and their writing. Later still came the Aztec, whose capital sat on an island in a lake. Different languages, different gods, different kings. But almost all of them played a version of the same ballgame, and almost all of them built courts for it. How many courts? More than you would ever guess. The French archaeologist Eric Taladoir spent years cataloging them and counted well over 1,000 ball courts scattered across Mesoamerica, from the deserts of the north down into Central America. Over 1,000 stone arenas built by hand for one game. Now step back onto the court and feel what playing it was actually like. The ball is solid rubber, no air inside. Depending on the version, it can weigh as much as 3 or 4 kilograms, the weight of a heavy bowling ball, and it moves fast. In the most common form of the game, you were not allowed to touch it with your hands or your feet. You strike it with your hips, your thighs, your forearms, your backside. You throw your whole body at a heavy rubber sphere again and again, so you wear armor. A thick belt or yoke around your waist, padding on your hips, guards on your knees and arms. And still, the bruises are brutal. Spanish observers later wrote that players were struck so hard in the stomach or hip that the impact could be fatal, that men sometimes died on the court from a single blow. A ball that heavy, moving that fast, against a human body. The danger was not a story, it was physics. Why would anyone build their identity around a game that could break them? Because the game was never only a game. It was a way of touching the sacred. The clearest window into this comes from the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiché Maya, written down after the Spanish arrived, but carrying far older stories. In it, two heroes, the twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque, are summoned to the underworld, a place called Xibalba, to play ball against the lords of death. Their own father had played before them and lost his head for it. The twins play, and trick and die, and come back, and in the end, they defeat death itself. So in the Maya imagination, the ball court was a doorway, a place where the living and the dead met across a line. When you played, you were not just scoring points. You were stepping into the same arena where gods and heroes had wrestled with death. And sometimes, the death was real. Carved into the walls of the great ball court at the Maya city of Chichen Itza, you can still see the scene today. A player kneels. Another player stands over him holding the man's severed head. From the kneeling man's neck, instead of blood, the carver shows serpents and a flowering plant bursting upward. The message is woven right into the stone. Death on the court feeds life. The spilled blood becomes vines, becomes crops, becomes the world growing again. Scholars still debate the details. Was it the winning captain who was sacrificed as a supreme honor? The losing captain as a price? Captives forced to play a game they could never win? The answer probably changed from city to city and century to century. But the carvings and the skulls displayed near some courts leave little doubt that for certain games, in certain places, the final score was settled in human lives. Now look up at that court again, because its very shape is telling you something. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza is enormous, stretching about 160 meters from end to end, longer than a modern football field. High on the long walls hang stone rings, and to send the heavy rubber ball cleanly through one was so difficult it could end the game outright. Many Mesoamericans saw the bouncing ball as the sun, or the moon moving across the sky, and the court as the cosmos in miniature. Every match reenacted the daily struggle between day and night, light and dark, life and death. You were not playing on a field. You were playing inside a model of the universe. Here is the part that should change how you see all of this. This was not a grim ritual that people endured. It was also wildly popular entertainment, and people bet on it like mad. Gold, land, even, he wrote, their own freedom, gambling themselves into slavery on a single game. People crowded the courts to cheer, to gamble, to lose their fortunes on a bounce of rubber. Strip away the sacrifice and the cosmology, and underneath it is something you would recognize instantly. Fans, stars, betting slips, heartbreak, auto. The Aztecs loved it so much that when the conqueror Hernán Cortés sailed back to Europe, he brought living ball players with him to perform before the Spanish court. In 1529, a German artist named Christoph Weiditz drew them in motion, two men bouncing a ball off their hips. It is the first picture of the game ever made on the far side of the ocean, the moment this 3,000-year-old sport was seen by European eyes for the very first time. And then, you might assume, it died. It nearly did. The Spanish banned and suppressed much of it, but it did not vanish completely. In a few towns in the western Mexican state of Sinaloa, people still play a direct descendant called ulama. The same hip strikes. A heavy rubber ball, made much the way it always was. A living thread reaching back across 3,000 years to those balls buried in the mud at El Manati. So here is the counterintuitive truth. You probably think of the deadly ball game as something impossibly distant and alien, a strange ritual of decapitation and stone rings. But almost everything about it is deeply familiar. the engineering of a better ball, the roar of a crowd, the reckless bets, the stars elevated to something like gods, the sense that a game can carry meaning far bigger than its score. The ancient players just lived it more honestly, with the stakes laid bare on the stone. Look at the next sporting crowd you find yourself in, the painted faces, the held breath before the final play, the way a whole arena rises and screams as if the fate of the world hangs on a ball. You will feel an echo of something very old. Because 3,000 years ago, on a long stone court, with a heavy rubber ball and the crowd pressed in along the walls, your fellow humans believed it truly did.